Hello and welcome to Man, Woman, God. I'm Nikki, and tonight my special guest is Benji Watson, who has an amazing story of God's love, power and grace. Benji, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Now Benji, I just want to go back to your childhood and just tell me what it was like at home and at school for you.
Okay, well, yeah, at home I don't quite remember much before my sister was born. I was around about 7 years old then. I have bits and pieces, but it's a bit, fragmented and whatnot. So, but yeah, I do remember that, from quite early on, things started getting a bit tense between my dad and I. We didn't always see eye to eye, and in hindsight, it's something I really regret. But can't change the past. I know that I was, quite more sensitive as boys come. Not really sort of the rough and tumble type when I was little, and so I was a bit more reclusive, a bit more introverted, which is so not like me now. And you talk to anyone who knows me now, that's not Benji. But yeah, so like I was a bit of a bookworm, and just school life was really tough. People were kind of targeted me, and despite the fact that I was always bigger and taller than everyone in my class, it's just because I was so sensitive, and I was just like, I don't want to fight, I don't want to be, that. So, I just kind of copped it, and yeah, it kind of, between home life and school life, it just was a joy.
Now Benji, you also started to have some sexual feelings and a struggle with your sexuality at a really young age. So tell me about that. Well,
it kind of became apparent to me around about the 7 or 8 year mark that I was starting to feel this attraction and towards men, towards boys my age, but also towards older men at certain points as well. And I didn't really think anything of it. I didn't know that there was, I didn't know if it was right or wrong. I thought that was just whatever, And it wasn't until I kind of made the transition from primary school to high school, I was around about 12 years old, when, the bullying started to, go up a notch, and, people were always, saying, you're gay or you're poor for all of that stuff. And I was like, oh, hang on, that means that I like guys, and I actually do. In that way, I think, but I don't know. How do they know? Oh my gosh! And so I just had this big spin out, and I was like, and that kind of, just aided alongside with the bullying. It just kind of took me into this depression that kind of lasted for several years.
So let's just go back to those feelings of towards men, sexual feelings towards men. Did it come out? How did your family cope with this?
Well, at first I tried really hard to hide it. So, people would, I would say at school, why are you teasing me? Why are you calling me gay or poof? What is it that I'm doing that you think is gay? And I'd say, oh, you're crossing your legs funny. And so I'd rearrange my legs, and I'd just focus on how the straight macho man would act. And I would, to a certain extent try and do that, or at least try and not be so effeminate. When I was at home especially, I was petrified of the idea of my family finding out. And so I didn't start to act it out until I was about 17, 18. By then I'd told my parents. I thought, I wasn't living at home at the time, and I thought it would be a fantastic idea on New Year's Day, 2 o'clock New Year's morning. I'm quite sufficiently inebriated at this point, and I'm just like, I'm going to send a text message to my parents and tell them that I'm gay, because that just seems like a fantastic idea to do. Can I tell you it's not? It didn't, I would have preferred to have done it a different way. And it was, from that point on, once everyone in my world knew, I started to experiment, I started to embrace it more, and I actually allowed it to become my identity. I allowed it to, to testify to who I was. I am Benji and I am gay. That is who I am. And that's when it started to become a lot more effeminate. I I'd go get my nails done, little French tips with little diamantes and stuff, and I'd pluck my eyebrows, and I'd full face of makeup. I didn't leave the house without it because, in my mind I might run into the love of my life down the street, so I got to be looking fine. Do my hair, and I even started shaving my legs, and I went the full mile, I was flaming. And
Now, so you also were struggling with depression as well. So talk about that.
Well, as I said, that kind of started around about the age of 12. I hit high school and the bullying escalated. I was still wrestling through who I was with my sexuality and what that meant, and starting to understand the implications of that in society, drawing that from what people were saying about me and to me. And, so between all of those wrestles, I just kind of, started entering this period of feeling really crap, really crap about myself, really crap and pessimistic about the future. And, I think, it was about that time that I started to self-harm, and I just started off as a once in a blue moon thing, and it became far more regular, and just as I spiraled down more and more, and it was by about the age of 18 that I was diagnosed with manic depression, and medicated for it. But then I went off the meds because I thought it was a fantastic idea. I'm just full of fantastic ideas, you see. And it just...
So you've had a bit of a roller coaster ride you were homeless as well, and you've been taking different sorts of drugs and experimenting. And so what was your life like doing all of that?
Interesting. Very interesting.
Because you would go off, wouldn't you? You'd sort of go off to Sydney and come back and...
Well, Sydney, that happened later. That happened when God had already entered my life. I went up to Queensland, and I was like, I think, that had happened. Like, I'd already experienced being homeless before that, but I went up there just because I wanted to get away from where I'd grown up. And, I knew someone up there, so I went up there, and I'd already started experimenting with drugs at this point. But then, there were people that, I met up there who, were quite into drugs. And I was like, oh yeah. And so I started experimenting with, different things as well, and, kind of started spending my rent money on it. And that's when it became a bit problematic, and we had to run back home to Melbourne.
Okay, well, we're just going to take a break, Benji, but we'll come back with more of your story.
No worries.
We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back. I'm speaking with Benji Watson. Now, Benji, before the break, we were talking about just a bit of a downward spiral that you were with drugs and alcohol, and just your whole struggle with depression as well. It was at this point that you actually had an encounter with God.
Oh, so exciting.
Share that with us.
Okay, so as was mentioned earlier, I've kind of ended up homeless a couple of times, and it was during my final period of homelessness that this actually happened, where I was staying, wasn't working out. So kind of got kicked out of there, and, I was quite, quite heavily into drugs at that point. Nothing too heavy, mainly, marijuana. But yeah, I found myself homeless again, nowhere to go. And I'd been to an organisation in Lilydale called Anchor, which I knew helped with, people who were struggling with homelessness. They would find emergency accommodation, transitional housing, government housing, things like that. And so, I made my way there thinking that's my only option. And, I got there and I walked in, and I just remember, saying I've got nowhere to go. And I have a shocking memory. Anyone who knows me can testify to how shocking my memory is, but I do specifically remember that this was a Friday. And that, like I said, I got nowhere to go, and they said to me, can you make the weekend? And I was like, sure. And they gave me, a food hamper thing, and that was it, and sent me off my way. And they took my contact details, and they said, look, we'll get in touch with you as soon as we have somewhere for you. And I was like, all right, cool. And so I caught the bus back into my hometown, and I was like, on the way there, I was like I don't even know why I'm going there. I've got nowhere to go. I've got no one. I've intentionally cut everyone off, you know, and just, you know, wasn't in a good way when I did that, when I made that decision, but I did. And I was particularly concerned because not like, you know, like I'd found hard places to sleep before, but, you know, I was at this point in time where I couldn't really get to sleep unless I'd had some pot. And so I was like, what do I do? And then I thought, oh, I know, I can go to this person's house, who I'm not going to mention. And I knew that, you know, they're pretty easygoing, that there would be a chance that I could end up just falling asleep on the couch, and that'd be night one down, and there would hopefully be some drugs there too. So I went there, and sure enough there was. But then someone walked in with some magic mushrooms, you know, these natural hallucinogenics. And I was like, wow, I could do with an escape from reality tonight. And so, you know, we boiled those up in a tea, and, you know, I think about half an hour later, stuff started to get interesting. You know, I'd go up to someone and their faces were rippling, and I was like, what the hell? And then stuff really started to get interesting. I started to get a bit panicky, and it was really strange because I knew that there was nothing to be afraid of. Like, I knew there was nothing to be panicked about, but I remember sitting there thinking, I am safe, no one around me is going to hurt me, I am fine, but I am scared out of my mind, and I don't know why. And I just couldn't sit still, and I felt like my skeleton was going to jump out of my body, but it couldn't because it was attached to my bones and my flesh and my muscles, and I have not very good knowledge of anatomy. But it was a struggle to not kind of fall apart. And I remember looking across the room at someone, and I said, look, I just need to know that you're real and you're not a hallucination. I think I remember saying that. It could all be in my head, I don't know. But, you know, I'd go in waves. I'd get really, really panicky, and then I'm like, nah, I'm fine. And really panicky again, and then, nah, I'm fine. And every time I entered that moment of like panic, I thought to myself, I need to get to my cousin. You know, I'm really close to my cousin, haven't seen her in ages, but if I get to her and I give her a hug, everything will be okay. This was the thought that kept going through my mind. And I remember trying to find her on Facebook, and then I realised she's not on Facebook because I deleted her, because I deleted everyone. So I try and find her number. Of course I don't have her number because I deleted everyone's number because I cut everyone off. I know where she lives, hopefully she's home. So I got someone to drive me there. And we showed up at about, it would have been like, you know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. You know, and I got into her bedroom, and I was just a mess, you know, and I was just like, I can't cope. And I kind of jumped on her bed and I gave her a hug. And I was just like, there's that hug that I needed to give her. And, you know, and then I scooted down. She was sitting on her bed, and I kind of scooted down, and I put my arms around her waist and I just held on. And for that moment in time, she was like my center of gravity. And I kind of felt like, okay, I'm secure now. And then, you know, once I started to get my breath back, I let go, and I just laid down on her bed. And then I always struggle to find the right words to describe this in a way that doesn't sound cliche or anything, but all that tension and all that the fear and that anxiety left me. And like, you've got kids, you've been carrying around your kids and, shopping or whatever, and then all of a sudden you put them all down, and just for that moment you feel light. It was like that. Just all of a sudden I felt so light, like all of this weight had just been lifted off, and I was like, I can breathe. And I stopped hallucinating, and I had so much clarity in my mind. It was so crystal clear. And I was lying there, and I felt warm. And I felt, just almost tingly, but not, like just really nice and warm. And I couldn't move. And, I remember, like when I was little, my nan had told me about Jesus, told me about God, and I tried, to give it a go, and then it wouldn't last, and I'd walk off because I didn't experience it or anything like that. I didn't feel the experience. I tried and it didn't work, and just, in hindsight, I guess the enemy, was really trying to keep me away from him. But, in this moment here, I was like, oh my gosh, this is God. This has to be God. And then I was like, nah, it's the drugs. Don't be stupid. No, it's God. he's real. No, it's just the drugs. And this went on for a bit. And then I finally kind of grasped, hang on, this is not normal. This doesn't feel normal. This is God. And then all of a sudden I was just like flooded with this like relief, but also like really in that moment my heart was gripped with this conviction. I was like, I can tell you right now, in my mind I was thinking, I have to tell the church. It was like an imperative. I have to tell the church. I have to tell people what God has just done for me. Oh my gosh. You know, and I'm a bit more animated right now, but like during that time I was just like on the bed. I was so in this place of like, wow.
We have to take a break, Benji, but we're
sorry.
going to, I know, it's very exciting. I'm sorry, I'd hate to stop you right there, but we will come back and talk some more.
Okay, no worries.
We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to Man, Woman, God. I'm here with Benji Watson, who's just shared his amazing encounter with God. Now, Benji, that was a beautiful encounter that you had with God. So tell me what happened after that, because God actually led you to a church.
Yeah, that was exciting. So like I said, I'd gone to that organisation that helps with finding a home, and a couple of days after this encounter, they actually called me and said, "Oh, we've got a room for you in a youth refuge." And so, I went there and, I met a girl there who I became good friends with for a while, and I just ended up sharing my experience with her, and she's like, "Oh, I'm a Christian and I go to a church. You should come to my church. It's a house church." And I'm like, "Oh, what's a house church?" And she's like, "I'll show you." And so it was actually a week after this encounter with God that I ended up, in Bayswater in this living room in this house, where they had a house church that they called Alabaster. And there was, about 12, 15 people there, and, that was intimidating, but turned out to be a really, really, really good thing.
So how did they cope with you in this church? Because they would have known that you were...
Yeah, no, they did know. My friend had told them everything, and I was fine with that. And, I remember, feeling a conviction on my heart probably, again, a week later after this, that my lifestyle was wrong. I had a boyfriend at the time, and I felt like that's not right. I shouldn't say lifestyle, but it's a stereotype. But yeah, it's what I was doing with my life was not what God intended. And so I sat down with my leader, Vicky Stokes, and I said to her, "What do I do? I think God made me this way. I don't understand why I should have to change. I don't get it. Can I even change? I don't know." And she said to me, best thing I've ever had said to me. She said to me, "Don't focus on the sin, focus on Jesus, because he is the one who will change your heart." And then she prayed for me, and I just felt peaceful. And it was a couple of days later that I said to God in my bedroom, "All right, I don't know what this journey looks like, but I'll walk it with you." And then it was about a week later, my boyfriend stopped contacting me, and I was like, dodge that bullet.
And so, Benji, what then happened in your life? How did you moved on with, how did you change? Did you change? Did God change you?
God changes us all. There's that continual transformation when we encounter him and when he comes into our life. And that is something that has been happening, for 2 years now since I've known him. I remember stamping my foot at him a couple of months after coming to Christ, and I was like, "Why won't you deliver me of this attraction to men? You've delivered me of drug addiction, deliver me of this attraction to men." And he said to me, "Benji, if I take it away and don't let you journey through it and teach you how to push through it, how am I going to use you to minister to others?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." This was the first pivotal moment of submission for me.
Now, Benji, you actually also are a youth group leader in your church. How did that all come about?
Well, I came back from a short-term missions trip in the western suburbs of Sydney, and I was all gung-ho to go to Eastern Europe. That was what I thought God was calling me to, and then it turned out it wasn't. And the guy I was living with at the time is a youth pastor at Crossway, and he said to me, he's a good mate of mine, and he said to me, "We're having box wars this Friday." I'm like, "What's that?" And he told me about it, and it's just this big outreach night, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds fun, can I join in?" And he said, "You need a Working with Children check." Went and got one, went to that night, and then yeah, just I fell into it from there, becoming a youth leader and working with the Year 8, Year 9 boys.
And how do people receive you as a youth group leader, knowing your past? Because you were quite public.
Yes.
In your church about your testimony.
Well, that was something that kind of God opened that door for that, public, for my testimony to be public. He opened that door, and then from there I was quite intentional about being open about my past, because I knew I was working with young boys, and I knew there are people who would think things and make presumptions, and I was like, no, I need to protect myself. I need to protect them and their families. So if I was going to hang out with one of them, one of the boys one-on-one outside of a Friday night, I would let my leader know. I would let my leader's leader know, and then I would make sure that the parents of that boy knew about my past, and just to be above reproach and just have accountability set up.
So how important is accountability?
Very, 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 very. And not so much for me. I'm fine. I think, I said to one of the youth pastors, I said, look, Mike, I'm not attracted to boys, I'm attracted to men, but people don't see that. And so accountability is more important because it's above reproach. It protects me when other people start to ask questions. If they are aware of the accountability that I have set up, it looks better.
So Benji, you obviously have a great deal of support around you, which is, a really important thing for you. But I really want to talk about how the church handles homosexuality. Do we do it well? That's what I want to know.
Look, I think it's such a hot topic right now, and I think it actually frustrates me that it is a hot topic. It frustrates me that, there is this discussion about how the church handles it. I think, in general, there are churches who don't handle it well, and there are churches that handle it better. I think, the way I want to look at it is that it all comes down to discipleship. And if we can get our heads around the fact that we are not meant to deal with people's sin, Jesus is meant to deal with people's sin, then we can start discipling the people in our lives. And regardless of where they're coming from, once they encounter Christ, as I have experienced, a transformation happens. As you start to surrender and submit your life to Him, He does the change, He does the transformation, He brings you into this new creation. That's His job, that's not our job. And so I think that's, just my main thought when I think of how the church is dealing with it. I'm like, if we just focus on the fact that it's discipleship, and you can learn basic discipleship methods from the Gospels, then you're pretty much set.
Benji, you have been an amazing guest. I want to thank you so much for coming, for being so open, for sharing your life. I just pray that God will just really lead you, because I can just see that He's going to do that. You've got a great life ahead of you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And on that note, I actually really want to say what Benji said about focusing on God, not on sin. I think we should all just take that home with us right now, and just, realise that God loves us no matter what situation we're in, and no matter what we're going through, that He cares for you. And let's just focus on Him, because I think once we do, everything else will just be insignificant. So that's all we have for you for tonight on Man, Woman, God. I'm Nikki, and I want to say God bless you. We'll see you next time.